Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Associate Professor and Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I'm happy to invite you all to our Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements asynchronous lecture series. It is a lecture series, but it's also what I refer to as an asynchronous dialogue. And that means and implies interaction of a kind. And the good news is you are already interacting. And this is just an opportunity to elevate your voices as we work through the course. So in theory, what we do is that we take those weekly readings, discussion questions that students are submitting, and look through, filter through the questions, ultimately for the sake of time, expediency, but also clarity, efficiency, draw from those questions to create a dialogue, an asynchronous dialogue, because while I'm producing this right now is whenever it is to you, right? It could be a different day, a different time of day, late at night, and so on. And so we're getting that educational experience. We're getting that interactivity, even if it's not happening live in real time, okay? And so this should be an exciting series. We've got some excellent books on deck to work through in the course, and I'll do my best to steer us in a fruitful direction with those readings. We're going to be looking at interviewing for journalists, so looking around, locating those texts, as well as Uprising, right? Scott Gidson's book regarding movement, sparking cultural movements. Excuse me. And then a little bit later in the course, we'll be looking at the spreadable media text from Henry Jenkins, Sam Ford, and Joshua Green. And so each week, students are tasked with submitting a pair of questions per reading, as we explain to them. And then, if we were in a physical, on-ground, live classroom setting, those questions, that's the type of questions that we could pass around, we could put on the board, we could pull up, we could dive into together in small groups, in large group discussion. But we're trying to replicate that in an effective manner in an online format, okay? And so it'll be a little bit different for those of you that have never encountered that, but it definitely adds a supplemental layer to what we're already doing in the class. And I'm just honored to be a part of the process as we move through the course. So let me get to some questions here. I thought you all did a fantastic job for so many belonging to outside or alternative degrees in this course, including our brethren, our sistren in the digital marketing major. I think this course has a lot of crossover appeal and should speak to you in some direct ways. I think at least two, if not all three of the texts we'll be reading in this book have immediate application for you, and the kinds of items you can hold on to and continue to reference in future coursework. But let's get to some questions. Again, it's an abridged series. I just try to pick from the top. I try to avoid replicating questions. Just like we're learning with interviewing guests, you never want to ask the same question twice. It can communicate a few things. Whether intentionally or accidentally, it communicates incompetence on the part of the question writer, the question asker, the interviewer, and it's a loss, right? It's to cover the same ground multiple times means that we're losing ground, losing an opportunity to engage in other spaces, and in almost all interview settings, time is of the essence. You only have a set block of time to execute. And so that's a philosophy that works with us when we're engaging guests, and that's a philosophy that carries over into this exercise as well. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions from Haley. Specifically, she's asking or commenting on interviewing for journalists, right? Emily Potter, is that right? Yeah. get that oral citation in there. But Haley first writes in chapter 1 of Interviewing for Journalists, it discusses the topic of anxiety and nervousness when it comes to interviewing. Question: is it normal for most interviewers to deal with nervousness before an interview? And this is a great question because it touches home for a topic I'm quite familiar with, engaging with students and even professionals. And that's public speaking, right? And in public speaking, we have a couple of different terms for talking about what's referred to as either public speaking anxiety or communication apprehension, to use that broader theoretical term. And it can be normal. I think our goal is always to to continuously improve, and the at its core, we improve through practice, we improve through repetition, we improve through experience. But even the best sports athletes in the world, or maybe the most competent public performers in the world, may still encounter various types of apprehension or anxiety that can be part of the process. But what we want to do is we want to condition ourselves in a way that helps us minimize it. So is it normal for most interviews? Now, I can't speak for all interviewers. And I think we revere the best interviewers in the world because they get to a place of real confidence, handling the moment, and they're opportunistic, right? They find and uncover and unearth and highlight incredible insights, and that's a talent, that's a skill, and it's a skill set, but it's a skill set we can acquire, we can grow with that, and that's certainly our goal. So it's possible. We can't make it an across the board claim. There will be, it's to varying degrees. Do people perhaps deal with nervousness prior to an interview? And I think there's a question or two later on that comes up about this that's seeking maybe advice or some things like that. Here's the next question. What are some ways that we as interviewers can deal with nervous feelings and grow out of the feeling of being anxious? Well, fair enough. We have our first follow-up question of the class, so excellent job there. Ways we can cope with it. I think always be prepared. Here's the deal. Look at the way this course is structured. All right. So believe it or not, course writers, right, come to the table with expertise, at least they should. We're simulating essentially what you should be doing as a professional. What is our assignment 1? Rough draft questions. Submit your rough drafts in. But guess what? The first question that ever comes to your mind, it's probably not the best question to ask. And you may want to scratch it. Because let's relate it again to public speaking. And we have every time we have a new presentation, we go through the phase of topic selection. What is the speech about? And then what is your speech going to be about? And it's important for students to put themselves through a filtering process, and ideally instructors help them learn and understand this process of the first couple of things I think of are probably quite generic, and they're going to be among the first things that other people first think of. And so this is where we get at, if you know your interviewee, are you researching them in advance? What extra steps are you taking to develop your questions? How about the richness of the wording of the question? We're not talking about a question being too convoluted to sort of perplex and confuse the subject, but we're talking about, well, how can your use of words, your strategic design of a question, stimulate the speaker in a way that just empowers them to give you the strongest, richest possible response? And that's what we're seeking. So writing great questions in advance is key. Interviews aren't great when they're improvisational. Okay, they aren't. And guess what? Let's translate this to the most immediate type of interviewing situation you will encounter. That's a job interview situation, all right? So we can relate this to a job interviewing situation. Are you improvising in a job interview situation? Because more often than not, that doesn't satisfy very well, all right? And when we think we know the best people or the people that exceed at this activity, really what they're doing is giving more of an extemporaneous response to questions, not improvisational response. And extemporaneous is prepared, it's rehearsed, it's thought out, it's practiced out. And guess what? So if we understand both sides of the coin here, right, both positions, the interviewer and the interviewee, right, if we're taking that into account, if we're kind of empathizing with both roles, then we can all of a sudden see the value of not just drafting our questions, but getting them in early, because we're sending these questions off in advance. If any of you all go into positions, jobs that require professional interviewing, and it doesn't mean journalism. I know our book is titled Interviewing for Journalists, and it is about that, but there are so many strategies to take from that. They expand beyond the realm of pure journalism. So let's debunk that myth right off the bat. This is not a book that's just purely for journalism students. It absolutely is not. I think all of us need to grow in that skill. Businesses are looking for competent employees capable of tackling and performing interviews. Let's grab a random example. If you go into human resources, what is one of those fundamental skills you're constantly doing? Exchanging information with people, interviewing them, orienting candidates, providing information in a competent manner. And so we can see the skill transcends. But back to the core question, how can we deal with nervous feelings? Experience, repetition over time, but management. A lot of it comes down to time management. Are you giving yourself enough time to prepare? If you're crossing enough of the items off the list to help you be in a position to be ready, then you're going to have less anxiety. Let's translate it one more time to the job interview talk. When you go on site for a job interview, are you following the appropriate recommendations? Are you getting there early, or are you rushing behind, right? The more flustered we are, the less in control of our time and space we are, the worse our performance is likely to be, right? We need to get to a place, no matter the role we're occupying, of empowering ourselves to reach our fullest potential in those situations. Questions from chapter 2. This chapter talks a little bit about interviewing people over lunch. Do you think that this type of interview could be more informative than the knock on the door interview, and why? Okay, Haley, this is a great question. And so just to clarify, what we get into as the author starts unpacking the book is various types of interview styles are defined for us. These nice little subsections. This is such a clean read, this book. I hope you all are opening it up, getting in there and seeing what a clean and quick read really this interviewing book is. It is so helpful to have these different categories to kind of visualize, because they're really assigning to us meaning for these various situations we might find ourselves in. So the knock on the door technique, hey, this is referring to old school journalism, right? The trench coat kind of like gotcha news, like it's raining, I'm trying to track down a story, right? I've got this lead, but I've got a source, and there's all this secrecy. You know, most news gathering and reporting isn't like that, okay? It's a lot different in a lot of ways. And so, you know, a power lunch, right? An interview lunch. This is a extremely interesting tool and ritual. And so we want to be aware of it as well. If you're on the job market and you're invited to a lunch, prospective employer has you out, I mean, here's what we need to remember. Or maybe you go on a campus, right? A large organizational firm has a big, spacious campus with a cafeteria, let's say, we're just kind of imagining here. And this includes like a lunch hour, and they don't want you to have to leave and come back. We'll treat you to lunch and so on, right? But of course, there'd be a few people with you and so on. Let's always remember, guess what? You're still on the clock. The interview is in progress, right? You're being evaluated. You're being evaluated now in a kind of social setting. But yet we still have to be careful, right? It's like, do I order the ribs, right? Do I get real sloppy here? do I try to keep it simple? And so look for that that motive, right? What is this situation, and how can I best present myself in an interviewing context? Oh, you can get great information, and this transcends thinking about a quote unquote meal. This might even be a sort of opportunity like, let's grab a beverage, right? The coffee talk. Well, many of these are provisional meetings, and sometimes they're the actual meeting, right? So here's the thing: always be ready to take advantage of that moment, that opportunity. You're not promised it again, so you don't want to just walk in cold assuming, well, there's going to be a next time, because that first meeting is you trying to get in or get through the door, or stabilize the condition of that relationship, which is going to lead to important information for you. Ideally, why else would you be having an interview launch? And finally, from these questions, how can we know that an interview will be lasting and successful? You can't. So this gets at, and Tommy asked a question about the inverted pyramid. This gets at, go with the most important information earliest, or at least, don't save everything for the very end. What if an interruption occurs? What if it's supposed to last an hour, an interview, and they get called away in half an hour, right? Don't just fire off your most important question first. You've got to warm up the client, warm up the interviewee, right? You need to get into a stable discourse with them, but be careful. Don't wait too long. Isn't that a danger? So often, I've been there myself. You have a great question, a great commentary you want to offer, and you wait too long, right? You let the moment slip, and it doesn't always come back again. Too often, it doesn't. All right, let's do a segment break here. We'll be back with more of your questions. We're just getting started.